At 8:12 on a bright Monday morning, the glass doors of the Royal Meridian Hotel slid open without a sound, and Amara Bediako stepped into the lobby like a woman trying to outrun disaster. Everything about her looked controlled. Her espresso-colored blazer sat perfectly on her shoulders. Her heels struck the marble with the sharp, expensive rhythm of authority. Her hair was pulled into a smooth knot. Her makeup was elegant, minimal, deliberate. To anyone watching, she looked like success. But beneath that polished surface, she was a woman holding her breath against collapse. For 7 years, she had built Lumina Grid from a bold idea into one of the most talked-about clean energy companies serving underserved communities across West and East Africa. She had stood on magazine covers, appeared on panels, shaken hands with ministers, CEOs, celebrities, and journalists. People had called her brilliant, visionary, relentless. What they did not know was that Lumina Grid had enough operating cash left for 10 weeks. 10 weeks. After that, payroll would fail. Construction sites would freeze. Contracts would unravel. People who had trusted her with their careers, their mortgages, their children's school fees would pay for her mistakes. She had one final chance that morning, a private breakfast meeting, a potential lead investor, a man she had never bothered to look up. Before we go further, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Amara moved toward the private lounge reserved for executive guests and investors. Her chief of staff, Nia Mensa, was already there, tablet in hand, her face tense in the way it had become tense every morning for the last 4 months. "He hasn't arrived yet," Nia said softly. Amara exhaled. "Good. Then maybe we still have time to make this look less desperate." Nia did not smile. She rarely smiled these days. The private lounge overlooked the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Atlanta shimmered outside in gold and blue, the skyline clean and confident under the sun. Inside, the room smelled faintly of polished wood, coffee, and cut orchids. 2 venture partners from Dubai stood near a sculpture pretending not to eavesdrop. A Kenyan infrastructure banker was scrolling through his phone. Somewhere behind the frosted partition, silverware chimed softly. This was Amara's natural habitat. Rooms like this. Controlled rooms. Rooms where people pretended decisions were rational while making them from ego, fear, vanity, and instinct. 3 years earlier, she had walked into such rooms as the future. Now she entered them as a warning sign in heels. "Did legal send over the revised bridge structure?" she asked. "Yes." "And the debt waterfall?" "Yes." "And the updated burn report?" Naya hesitated. Amara turned. "What?" "They sent it, but you should know. If this meeting doesn't work, the board will push for emergency restructuring by Friday." Amara's jaw tightened. "They can push." "They won't just push." The words hung there. Amara looked away first. It was not always like this. She had been born in Accra and raised partly in London, partly in Toronto, in a family that believed excellence was the only safe language for Black ambition. Her father had been a cardiologist who spoke in measured sentences and expected perfect grades without ever saying so directly. Her mother ran a successful import business and believed softness was a luxury women like her daughter could never afford. Amara learned early that the world rewarded polish. It trusted titles, accents, tailoring, institutions. It opened its doors faster for the right school, the right handshake, the right posture, the right performance of power. So she mastered all of it. Harvard, McKinsey, Stanford, then Lumina Grid, her answer to the power instability that had shaped the childhood memories of millions across the continent. Solar microgrids, battery storage, rural infrastructure, energy independence. It was not just a company in the beginning. It was conviction made visible. And then growth came too fast. Governments delayed payments. Expansion outran discipline. She hired executives with glittering resumes and ignored the engineers who warned her about scale. She cared too much about image when she should have cared more about systems. She dismissed objections as fear. She treated concerns like betrayal. She said she was protecting the mission. Maybe, at first, she believed that. At 8:29, her phone buzzed with a message from the board chair. Any update? She stared at it, then locked the screen without replying. At 8:34, a hotel attendant rolled a cart of coffee service past the lounge. At 8:37, a man in a dark green polo shirt and clean black trousers stepped out of the elevator carrying a slim leather portfolio and a folded umbrella. He moved without hurry. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, and somewhere in his early 40s. Not flashy, not nervous, not eager. Just composed in a way that did not ask permission from the room. His shoes were simple. His watch was modest. No entourage, no branding. No assistant trailing behind him with 2 phones and a strained smile. He looked, Amara decided in one dismissive glance, like hotel operations staff or a vendor representative who had wandered into the wrong wing. He approached the private lounge entrance. The hostess turned slightly toward him, but before she could speak, Amara lifted one hand. "This area is reserved," she said. The man stopped. His eyes moved to her face. Calm eyes, watchful eyes. "I know," he replied. His voice was deep and even. "I'm here to meet Ms. Bediako." Amara gave a short, incredulous laugh. The Dubai partners glanced over. "For what?" she asked. "For breakfast." Something in his answer irritated her immediately. The ease of it, the absence of apology. "This is a private investor session," she said, each word clipped. "If you're looking for conference logistics, registration is downstairs." The man did not move. "I'm not looking for registration," he said. Then he extended his hand. Jabari Ndlovu. The name landed nowhere in her mind. Not because it lacked meaning, but because she had never made space for it. She did not take his hand. Instead, she looked at it as though it were an inconvenience offered in public. Behind her, Nia's face changed. Fast. Tiny shift. Eyes widening. Breath catching. But Amara was too occupied with her own annoyance to notice. "I'm sorry," she said, though her tone held no apology at all. "Who exactly let you in here?" Jabari lowered his hand slowly. "Your office confirmed the meeting 3 weeks ago." The Kenyan banker near the window turned fully now. One of the Dubai men stopped pretending not to watch. Nia stepped forward. "Amara." But Amara cut across her. "Mr. Ndlovu, is it?" she said. "Whatever confusion happened, this is not how serious business is conducted. You don't just walk into an executive meeting dressed like hotel staff and expect people to—" Nia whispered sharply. "Amara, stop." Still, she didn't stop. The pressure of months, the fear, the humiliation of repeated rejection, the exhaustion of pretending to be fine, it all found the nearest target. "I have investors here," she said. "Real ones. People who value professionalism." The words hit the room like a dropped glass. Nia went pale. Jabari did not flinch, but something in his face closed. Not anger, not surprise. Recognition. As if he had seen this before. As if the script was old, and she had merely stepped into a role someone else had performed 100 times. He spoke carefully. "Ms. Bediako, if you'd like to check with your chief of staff or your board." She turned toward the hotel security desk. Can someone help here? The nearest guard looked up. Ma'am, this gentleman is not part of this meeting, Amara said, pointing, not dramatically, but worse, casually, like directing attention to a stain. Please escort him out. The words fell into a silence so complete, even the air seemed to stop moving. Naya stared at her as if she did not know her. Jabari's gaze stayed on Amara. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. Then he gave a single small nod, not to her, but to himself. That won't be necessary, he said. I know the way. But the damage was already alive. Phones were out now. Not many, just enough. A young woman near the corridor had begun recording. The security guard approached with the rigid discomfort of a man who understood too much and could control too little. Sir, he began. Jabari lifted one hand gently. It's all right. Then he looked at Amara one last time. Not pleading, not furious, simply done. You've given me the information I came for, he said. He turned and walked away with his back straight, portfolio under one arm, each step unhurried. No scene, no raised voice, no defense. That was somehow worse. Amara exhaled through her nose, smoothed the front of her blazer, and turned back toward the room as though she had solved a problem. But no one resumed speaking. The Kenyan banker's expression had hardened into something unreadable. One of the Dubai partners adjusted his cuff and looked away. Naya was frozen, tablet clutched to her chest. Finally, Amara said what people say when they have already done something unforgivable and don't yet know it. Now, she said, where were we? No one answered. Because in the space of 90 seconds, Amara Bediako had publicly humiliated the one man still considering whether her company deserved to survive. 3 months earlier, Lumina Grid had still looked salvageable from the outside. Not healthy, salvageable. The company operated in 5 countries and had spent years earning global praise for bringing stable power to communities too often ignored by large utilities. Clinics, schools, small manufacturing sites, agricultural storage hubs, villages where darkness had once dictated every evening schedule and every possible future. Investors loved the story. They loved the photographs of school children reading under white LED lights. They loved the clean decks about market access, climate resilience, and infrastructure equity. They loved Amara on stage in ivory suits, talking about energy justice with the confidence of a woman who believed history would make room for her. But numbers do not care about magazine covers. 2 major government receivables stalled for nearly 9 months. Construction costs climbed. Currency instability ate through margins. A rushed acquisition in Tanzania drained capital and delivered far less than promised. Lenders tightened. New term sheets came with suffocating conditions. By the time the finance team gave Amara the sober version instead of the optimistic version, the company was bleeding $12 million a month. She fired one treasurer, then another, then blamed market headwinds in interviews. Inside the company, people began whispering about her temper, about the executive team growing whiter and wealthier as the field teams carried the operational burden, about promotions delayed for high performers who were excellent but not polished enough, about how easily Amara recognized prestige and how poorly she recognized people. Those whispers did not matter to her until capital dried up. 21 firms passed. Some did it politely. Some did it with brutal honesty. Founder risk, concerns about leadership adaptability, excellent vision, weak internal trust, strong market, wrong steward. Amara deleted the harsher emails. She told herself they were threatened by a powerful African woman who would not shrink herself for their comfort. Sometimes that was true. Sometimes it was not. In Johannesburg, meanwhile, Jabari Ndlovu had spent 8 months studying Lumina grid. He had grown up in Soweto, the eldest of 4 children in a 2-room house where the electricity failed so often his mother kept candles in every drawer. He knew what darkness cost, not in metaphor, in medicine spoiled by heat, in homework left undone, in businesses forced closed, in mothers waking at 4 a.m. to cook before power disappeared again. He built his first company designing predictive battery management systems for unstable grids. A European conglomerate acquired it when he was 31. He took that money and built Ndlovu Impact Partners, a fund so quiet and disciplined that people outside serious infrastructure circles often had no idea how much influence it carried. He disliked spectacle. He distrusted vanity. And he almost always attended first meetings dressed simply. No luxury signals, no performance of wealth, just presence. It was not a game to him. It was a filter. He had once said in an interview, "The fastest way to learn whether someone respects human beings or only power is to remove the visible symbols of power and see what remains." That line circulated online for 2 days and then disappeared into the endless churn of content. Amara had never read it. On the morning of the hotel meeting, Jabari had left his suite with no expectation of drama. He had read the final diligence packet before dawn. He knew Lumina Grid's liabilities. He knew the upside. He knew the board had quietly accepted that he might insist on governance changes as a condition of any deal. He also knew what the company could still become under the right leadership and the right discipline. What he did not know until 8:37 a.m. was who Amara Bediako was when she believed she was dealing with someone ordinary. By 9:12 he was back in the car. His general counsel called first. "How did it go?" Jabari looked out at the city sliding by beyond the tinted glass. "It answered the question," he said. "That bad?" "Yes." Silence. Then, "Should I cancel the restructuring memo?" "Yes." "And the proposed term sheet?" "Yes." "What should I tell the team?" He waited a moment before replying. "Tell them we don't rescue institutions that punish dignity on sight." He ended the call, leaned back, and shut his eyes. Not because he was dramatic, because he was tired. Tired of the instant recalculations in other people's faces. Tired of rooms that welcomed his money faster than they welcomed his body. Tired of respect arriving late, but always pretending it had been there from the beginning. When his phone buzzed again, it was his younger sister, Zincle. He almost didn't answer, but he did. "You sound like thunder," she said after hearing him breathe hello. He laughed once, quietly. "That obvious?" "Always." He told her what happened. He kept his voice level, the facts only. The hand not taken, the assumption, the security guard, the pointing finger, the room full of witnesses. When he finished, Zincle said nothing for a few seconds. Then softly, "You know what hurts the most about things like this?" "What?" "It's never confusion. They always call it confusion. But your spirit knows the difference." Jabari opened his eyes. Outside, the city flashed past, bright and indifferent. "Yes," he said. "It does." At 11:06 a.m., Nia Mensah entered Amara's office without knocking. That alone told Amara something was wrong. Nia never entered without knocking. The office on the 36th floor was all glass, stone, and controlled taste. Awards on one shelf. industry reports stacked with deliberate untidiness on another. The city spread beyond the windows in hard blue light. It was the kind of office that told visitors, without words, that importance happened here. Amara stood at her desk, dictating edits to a financing memo. She stopped when she saw Nia's face. "What?" Nia set her tablet down. The screen displayed a profile page from the Financial Times. There was a photograph. Dark green polo shirt. Calm eyes. That same face. Below it, the headline read, "Jabari Ndlovu, the reluctant titan of African infrastructure investing." Amara looked from the article to Nia, then back again. "What is this?" Nia's voice was tight. "That was him." "Him who?" "The investor." The room changed temperature. Amara picked up the tablet. She read, "Founder of Ndlovu Impact Partners. Portfolio value exceeding $4 billion. Quiet influence across energy, logistics, agritech, healthcare infrastructure. Board advisor to sovereign development initiatives. Known for backing long-horizon founders overlooked by traditional Western capital. Public advocate for dignity-led leadership." Her throat dried. "No." Nia said nothing. Amara kept reading. He had been shortlisted among the most influential investors reshaping African industrial growth. He had funded grid modernization in Zambia, cold chain logistics in Ghana, health systems in Rwanda, and school electrification projects in rural provinces across southern Africa. Lowering on the page, almost as an aside, the profile mentioned his meeting habits. Ndlovu often dresses casually for first meetings, saying it reveals more about others than any prepared pitch ever could. Amara sank slowly into her chair. For a moment, her mind refused the information, refused it as the truth, refused it as something already fixed in the world. "No," she repeated, but this time weaker. Nia swallowed. "He was scheduled for the 8:30 breakfast. I sent you the briefing yesterday and again this morning." Amara stared at her. The memory came back in merciless detail. The hand, the room, the guard. "You're sure?" Nia's expression changed then, not to pity, but to something sadder. "Yes." Amara's fingers slipped on the edge of the tablet. "How much?" "What?" "How much was he considering?" Nia looked down once before answering. "Up to 400 million, with restructuring support and strategic guarantees." The number moved through Amara like cold metal. 400 million. Enough to stabilize the company, enough to reassure creditors, enough to avoid forced asset sales, enough to buy time, credibility, breath. Her phone was suddenly in her hand, and she did not remember picking it up. "Get me his number." "I already sent it." Amara dialed. 1 ring. 2. 3. Voicemail. She hung up and dialed again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. She stood up too fast and the chair hit the credenza behind her. "Nia." "Yes? Tell me this can be fixed." Nia looked at her with the exhausted honesty of someone who had run out of professional cushioning weeks ago. "I don't know." Amara called again. No answer. She opened her email, typed too fast, deleted half the message, started over. "Mr. Ndlovu, I believe there was a terrible misunderstanding this morning." Stared at the words. Terrible misunderstanding. Even now, her first instinct was to rename what she had done. She erased the sentence, typed again. "Mr. Ndlovu, my behavior this morning was unacceptable. I judged you before I knew you, and I humiliated you publicly. I am deeply sorry, and would be grateful for the chance to apologize in person." She hit send. Then she called the board chair. He answered on the second ring. "Please tell me," Kojo Ajiman said, "that the message I just received is false." Amara closed her eyes. "I didn't know who he was." The silence that followed was heavy enough to feel physical. When Kojo finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. "That is not the point." She gripped the edge of her desk. "It was a mistake." "No," he said. "A mistake is sending the wrong deck. A mistake is missing a footnote in legal review. What you did was reveal yourself." The words hit harder because some part of her knew he was right. "Kojo, do you understand that Ndlovu was the only investor still willing to look past our numbers? Do you understand that I spent 6 weeks persuading him to meet you, despite internal concerns about culture?" Internal concerns. There it was. She felt, suddenly, terribly, how many people had seen what she had refused to see. "I'm trying to reach him." "You should be trying to understand what he saw." The line went dead. At 12:14 p.m., a post appeared on social media from a venture partner who had been in the hotel lounge. It named no company, named no person, but anyone who knew the morning's schedule could read between the lines. Watching a black investor get publicly dismissed and nearly removed from a private finance meeting because he didn't fit someone's idea of importance was a reminder that bias still sits comfortably in expensive rooms. The post spread. By 1 p.m., journalists were calling communications. By 1:18 p.m., an industry newsletter published a blind item. By 2:05 p.m., Amara had called Jabari 12 times. By 3:40 p.m., the board scheduled an emergency evening session. By 4 p.m., she understood with frightening clarity that the worst thing she had lost might not be the deal. It might be the illusion she had about herself. That night, she went home to a penthouse apartment that had once felt like proof. Proof that sacrifice led somewhere. Proof that the girl from Accra who learned to hide uncertainty behind excellence had won. Now the apartment felt staged, beautiful and airless. Art on the walls, books she had not touched in months. A dining table made for 8 and used mostly by 1. She opened her laptop and searched Jabari Ndlovu properly for the first time. Not as a target, not as an investor, as a person. There were interviews, panels, essays, a commencement address, a photo of him visiting a rural clinic powered by one of his grid initiatives, a video of him speaking to young founders in Lagos, an old documentary clip with his mother, who laughed easily and said he used to repair broken radios with butter knives and stubbornness. The more she watched, the worse she felt, because there was no arrogance in him, no performance, no hunger to impress. Just clarity. In one interview, the host asked him whether prejudice still surprised him at his level of success. Jabari had smiled sadly before answering. "It doesn't surprise me anymore, but it still costs something every time. People think the harm disappears once you can afford better rooms. It doesn't. You just experience it under better lighting." Amara paused the video. Her chest tightened. Under better lighting. She thought of the hotel lobby, the polished floors, the orchids, the chilled air, the silent witnesses. The guard approaching with reluctance in his steps. She saw herself there as if from outside. Elegant, certain, cruel. Her phone buzzed. A text from communications. Press requests escalating. Need guidance. Another from the CFO. Lenders asking whether incident affects funding process. Call me. Another from Kojo. Board at 8. Do not come defensive. She placed the phone face down and sat in the darkening room while evening spread over the city. At 11:47 p.m., she booked a red-eye to New York. Not because she believed she deserved to be heard, because staying still had become impossible. The next morning, Ndlovu Impact Partners occupied the top floors of a restrained tower in Manhattan. Its lobby designed in white stone, bronze, and quiet power. Amara arrived with no sleep, a wrinkled cream coat, and eyes that made her look older than 40. The receptionist, a poised woman named Amina, looked up from her desk. "Good morning. How may I help you?" "I need to see Mr. Ndlovu." "Do you have an appointment?" "No." Amina's fingers rested lightly on the keyboard. "I'm sorry. Mr. Ndlovu sees visitors by schedule only. Please tell him Amara Bediako is here." There was the smallest flicker in the receptionist's face. Recognition. Not warm, not welcoming, just recognition. Amina made a discreet call. She listened, spoke softly, hung up. "I'm sorry, Ms. Bediako. Mr. Ndlovu is unavailable." Amara nodded once. "I'll wait. There is no indication he will be available today." "I understand." She sat near the windows. The chair was beautiful and unforgiving. Hours began to accumulate. At 9:40, associates crossed the lobby carrying coffees and laptops. Some recognized her and looked away quickly. Some didn't bother hiding their curiosity. One older man stared openly, then shook his head as if confirming a story he had already heard. At 10:25, Amina brought water. At 11:10, Amara drafted another apology by hand and did not send it. At 12 o'clock, she bought a bouquet from the florist across the street, then felt foolish the instant she returned with it. Flowers were too easy. Flowers were what people sent when they wanted grace without cost. Still, she handed them over with a short note. "I judged you in a way no human being deserves. I know an apology cannot undo public harm. I am asking only for the chance to say that to your face. Amara." At 1:15, Amina approached. "Ms. Bediako?" Amara stood immediately. "Mr. Ndlovu will give you 15 minutes. Her knees nearly weakened with relief, but she kept her face still. "Thank you." 4th floor, room 4B. The elevator ride felt longer than the flight from Atlanta. Room 4B was not large. No skyline, no grand desk. Just a conference table, 6 chairs, a pitcher of water, and soft gray walls that made truth feel unavoidable. Jabari was already there. Same composure. Different shirt. Deep blue this time. Sleeves rolled once at the forearms. He did not stand when she entered. "Please sit," he said. Amara sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she began. "Mr. Ndlovu, I came to apologize." He lifted one hand. "Before you do," he said quietly, "I need you to stop calling it confusion." The words froze her. He folded his hands on the table. "The issue is not that you didn't know my net worth. It's not that you didn't recognize my name. It's that you looked at me, made an instant judgment about who belonged in that room, and acted on it with total confidence." His voice never rose. That made it impossible to hide from. You didn't ask a question. You didn't verify. You didn't offer basic courtesy. You saw a black man in simple clothes and decided I was beneath professional respect. Amara's eyes burned. He continued, "If I had been a white man in a tailored suit with a Swiss watch, would you have treated me that way?" She could not answer immediately, because the truthful answer arrived before the defensible one. "No," she said at last. Jabari nodded once. "That is what happened." She swallowed hard. "Yes." The room held the word between them. Yes. Not misunderstanding. Not pressure. Not optics. Yes. He leaned back slightly. "You flew here quickly." "I deserved to." "That's not what I asked." She lowered her gaze for a second, then met his eyes again. "I flew here because I needed to stop hiding behind language." That seemed to interest him, but only slightly. "And what language were you hiding behind?" Her voice came out quieter now. "Stress, pressure, miscommunication, image. All the softer words people use when they still want to protect themselves from the truth." "And the truth?" Amara inhaled slowly. "The truth is that I saw someone who did not fit my narrow idea of power, and I treated him as less than worthy before he spoke." Silence. Not forgiving silence. Evaluating silence. Then Jabari said, "Do you believe you are unusual?" She blinked. "What?" "In this, in what you did. Do you believe you are exceptional?" The question struck her strangely. "No." "Good," he said, "because the problem is larger than your behavior. Your behavior is simply a visible expression of a system many powerful people depend on without naming." He stood and walked to the windowless wall, as if there were still something to look through. "When I was 27, he said, I arrived at a board dinner in London, and the hostess asked me where I would be setting up the audio equipment. I was the guest speaker. At 34, I was handed a coat at an investor retreat because someone assumed I worked there. Last year, at an airport lounge, a man asked if I could help him with his bags. There is no amount of success that cancels what some people have already decided they are seeing." Amara did not move. He turned back. "So you need to understand this clearly. What happened in that hotel did not begin with you, but you still chose it." She nodded once, tears threatening now. "Yes." He returned to the table and slid a folder toward her. Amara stared at it. "What is this?" "Conditions." Her breath caught. He said nothing else. She opened the folder. The first page was not a term sheet. It was a governance proposal. Independent cultural audit across all Lumina Grid offices. Public acknowledgement of discriminatory conduct. Mandatory bias and leadership coaching for the executive team. Anonymous third-party reporting channels for staff. Board reconstitution with measurable diversity targets. Internal pay equity review. A founder transition plan within 90 days. A $10 million personal commitment from Amara, not the company, to a fellowship fund for African engineers from underrepresented communities. Her hands trembled as she turned pages. Near the end, one line was underlined. "If the audit reveals systemic discrimination and leadership obstruction, Ndlovu Impact Partners reserves the right to withdraw publicly and disclose cause." Amara looked up. "You would still invest?" Jabari's face remained unreadable. "I would invest in the mission, the employees, and the communities that depend on the work, not in the illusion that success excuses harm. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And me? I don't owe you rescue," he said. "What I owe, when possible, is alignment between my values and my actions." She looked down at the papers again. A founder transition plan, meaning step down, meaning lose the role that had become her identity, meaning survive but changed. Halfway through the folder, her vision blurred. Not because the conditions were unfair, because they were fair. Painfully, uncompromisingly fair. She closed the folder and sat still for several seconds. Then, with more honesty than she had offered in months, she said, "I want to say, I need time. I want to bargain. I want to ask for smaller consequences." Jabari waited. "But if I'm honest, that urge is exactly the problem." He said nothing. Amara lifted her eyes. "I accept." A flicker of something passed through his expression then. Not warmth, not trust. Respect, perhaps, for the absence of negotiation. "You understand what this means?" "Yes." "You may lose your role." "Yes." "You will definitely lose control." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "Yes." He nodded. "Then my team will proceed." The relief that moved through her was strange, because it arrived braided with grief. For the company. For the version of herself now ending. For the fact that it had taken public shame to force private truth. She stood slowly. "Thank you." Jabari remained seated. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "The difficult part isn't signing conditions. It's living inside them." She absorbed that. Then she said the only thing left that mattered. "I am sorry." He held her gaze for a long moment. "I know you are sorry now," he said. "The question is whether sorrow becomes structure." That sentence followed her all the way back to the elevator. Sorrow becomes structure. Not performance, not regret. Structure. If you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories. The press conference took place 48 hours later in Lumina Grid's main auditorium. Not a hotel ballroom, not a controlled investor summit. The company auditorium. In front of employees, journalists, creditors, board members, and cameras. Amara stood at the podium with no teleprompter. Kojo had wanted one. Communications had insisted. Legal had drafted safer language. She rejected all of it. For once, she did not want safety. The room was hot under studio lights. Every sound felt amplified. The rustle of papers, the scrape of chair legs, the breath before a question. She placed both hands on the podium and began. 2 days ago, I publicly mistreated a man because of how I judged his appearance and what I assumed that appearance meant. The room went still. His name is Jabari Ndlovu. He came to meet me for a scheduled investment discussion. Instead of offering him courtesy, I treated him as if he did not belong. I refused his greeting. I made assumptions before asking a single question. I called security. What I did was not confusion. It was bias enacted with confidence. Somewhere in the front row, a camera shutter snapped rapidly. She continued. I am not standing here to ask for immediate forgiveness. I am standing here to tell the truth and to name the damage honestly. Harm is not reduced because it happens in polished language or prestigious settings. It remains harm. Her throat tightened, but she pushed through. For years, Lumina Grid has spoken about access, equity, and inclusive growth. Yet the values we marketed outside were not consistently practiced inside. That failure starts with leadership. It starts with me. There was no way to know how the words landed in every heart. Some employees cried quietly. Some watched with folded arms. Some were unmoved. Some were angry. Some were relieved only that what they had lived through might finally be named. Amara announced the full set of conditions: the independent audit, the board changes, the leadership coaching, the reporting protections, the fellowship fund, and finally, the founder transition. I will step down as CEO as part of this process. The room inhaled as one. She heard it, felt it, a wave moving through human bodies. She went on. This is not martyrdom. It is accountability. A title is not more sacred than the people harmed beneath it. The questions came immediately afterward. Did you only apologize because Mr. Ndlovu is powerful? Would you have faced consequences if no one had recorded the incident? Are there employees who previously raised concerns? Do you consider yourself racist? That last question lingered longest. Amara answered slowly. I consider myself responsible for an act of dehumanizing bias, and I consider it cowardice to hide behind semantics while people absorb harm. By evening, every major business outlet had the story. Headlines sliced her apart with the efficiency of public judgment. Founder steps down after public bias incident. Lumina Grid undergoes governance overhaul. Investor demands structural reform, not symbolic contrition. The board met late into the night. At 10:13 p.m., Kojo called. The vote is done. She was sitting alone in her office, city lights reflected in the dark glass. And? Your transition begins immediately. David Okoye will serve as interim CEO until the audit concludes. David, Chief Operating Officer, Nigerian-American, steady, understated, trusted by teams she had overlooked. For years, she had considered him useful but not commanding enough for the top role. Now she heard, beneath that old judgment, the arrogance it had always contained. He'll do well, she said. Kojo's voice softened just slightly. He already is. After the call ended, she sat without moving. All her life she had feared disappearance. Now she was not disappearing. Worse, she was staying visible long enough to face who she had been. The audit was relentless. That was its mercy. A respected third-party firm interviewed current staff, former staff, board members, field engineers, assistants, recruiters, regional leads, security contractors, interns, and executives across 6 offices. Nothing was hidden behind title. Nothing was softened for comfort. The report took 10 weeks. It revealed patterns that made denial impossible. Promotion pathways that favored pedigree over performance. Senior leadership appointments clustered around shared schools, accents, and social familiarity. Repeated complaints from Black employees, darker-skinned employees, and lower-income hires who described being labeled not client-facing, rough around the edges, technically strong but not polished, too intense, not the right fit for investor environments. Most of these phrases had once sounded normal to Amara. Now they sounded like evidence. The report found no cartoon villains, No dramatic manifesto, no official discriminatory policy. What it found was more familiar and more dangerous. Bias hidden inside professional language. Hierarchy protecting itself. Culture shaped by what leaders rewarded and ignored. Amara read every page. All 186 of them. Alone. Twice. At one point, she reached a section quoting anonymous employee testimony from 3 years earlier. I believed in the mission, but I learned quickly that the people closest to power were the ones who looked, spoke, and moved in ways leadership found comfortable. We were electrifying communities while dimming people internally. She stopped there for a long time. Electrifying communities while dimming people internally. No one could accuse her more accurately than that. The report recommended sweeping changes, and under Jabari's agreement, those recommendations became binding conditions. David Okoye did not waste time. He created listening sessions in every region. He moved reporting structures. He expanded leadership criteria beyond polish and institutional prestige. He recruited from talent pools the company had historically ignored. He ended the quiet immunity of certain senior executives. He tied compensation to cultural metrics and team retention. He elevated engineers and operators who had long been invisible to the company's self-image. He did not speak in dramatic slogans. He changed process. And because he changed process, people began to breathe differently. Not overnight. Trust never returns overnight. But differently. In Nairobi, a project director who had nearly resigned stayed. In Kumasi, 2 women engineers were promoted into strategic operations. In Lagos, HR complaints that would once have disappeared into polite silence were investigated fully. In Atlanta, recruiters were forced to justify culture fit language with actual criteria, or not use it at all. Amara watched all of this first from board packets, then from meetings she attended in silence. She was not erased. She was decentered. It felt like losing altitude and oxygen at the same time. There were practical consequences, too. Conference invitations vanished. A university speaking series withdrew its offer. 2 nonprofit boards asked for her resignation. A foundation quietly delayed a leadership honor it had once seemed eager to award. At restaurants, sometimes she noticed recognition in the eyes of strangers before they looked away. Once, in a grocery store, a woman in her 60s stared for several seconds before saying, "I know your face. You're the one from that video." Amara had no reply prepared for moments like that. So she said, "Yes." The woman's expression did not hold drama, just disappointment. "I hope you meant that apology," she said, then wheeled her cart away. Small moments. Sharp moments. Not equal to what many others carried for lifetimes, but enough to remove the comforting fantasy that public statements solved anything. The leadership coaching began in a quiet office downtown with Dr. Lindiwe Maseko, a South African organizational psychologist whose first gift was the refusal to flatter. On the second session, Dr. Maseko asked, "When did you first learn that respect belongs more naturally to some people than others?" Amara frowned. "I didn't." Dr. Maseko held her gaze. "Then let me ask again. When did you first learn to rank humanity through performance?" It took Amara a long time to answer. Eventually, she said, "Probably when I learned that excellence was the only thing that made certain rooms feel safe." Dr. Maseko nodded. "And what happens to people who remind you of what those rooms would have done to you if you had arrived without polish?" The question sank like a stone. Amara understood then. with a shame so intimate it made her chest ache, that some of her cruelty had not been born from superiority alone. Some of it had come from worship. Worship of the standards she once believed had protected her. Standards she had enforced downward because part of her still feared what might happen if she loosened them. That did not excuse her, but it named her more truthfully. Months passed. The company stabilized. Jabari kept his distance, but not completely. Quarterly review meetings were formal, sharp, and unsentimental. He asked hard questions. He read the audit follow-through reports closely. He met with employee councils directly. He never once acted as though his investment had purchased moral sainthood or sentimental authority. He simply insisted the commitments become real. At the second quarterly review, he joined by video from Kigali. David presented retention improvements, operational recovery, and early culture indicators. After 40 minutes of metrics, Jabari asked one question. What are the people with the least institutional power saying now? The room grew quiet. Then David answered honestly. They still don't trust us fully. But many of them say this is the first time they've seen consequences reach the top. Jabari nodded once. That's a beginning. Amara, sitting 3 seats away, wrote the sentence down. A beginning. Not redemption. Not closure. A beginning. By the documentary's release, the story had grown larger than any one company. A respected filmmaker titled it Before the Handshake. The opening scene used hotel footage, grainy, silent, unmistakable. Amara turning. Jabari extending his hand. The refusal. The point toward security. No soundtrack was needed. The image itself accused. Then came interviews. Current staff, former staff, board members, culture experts, founders, security workers, recruiters, economists. Leaders who spoke openly about how often Black excellence was welcomed only after validation by wealth or elite visibility. Jabari appeared midway through the film, seated in a plain chair in a room with no dramatic lighting. He said, "The reason people responded so strongly to that footage is not because it was rare. It's because it was visible."
Most humiliations of that kind happen without witnesses, without money at stake, and without anyone being forced to explain themselves afterward. The interviewer asked whether he regretted investing after the incident. He thought for a few seconds. I regret the conditions that made the incident unsurprising. I do not regret demanding structure instead of symbolism. When Amara's interview aired, viewers expected either tears or self-defense. She offered neither performance nor escape. I harmed a man in public because my mind completed a story about him before he spoke. The harder truth is that I had built parts of my leadership style around similarly harmful assumptions for years. Not always loudly, not always consciously, but consistently enough to shape who rose, who was trusted, and who was made to feel provisional. The documentary did not flatter her. It did not demonize her theatrically either. It placed her where accountability belongs, inside consequence. The film went viral anyway. Business schools assigned it. Board retreats screened it. People wrote essays. Podcasts debated it. Executives posted polished reflections on LinkedIn. Employees, predictably, rolled their eyes at some of those. But something still shifted. A phrase from the film traveled especially far. Dignity should not need a resume. Jabari did not coin it for social media. Someone clipped the line from his interview and posted it. Then others did. Soon it was everywhere, on conference slides,
in leadership decks, in staff training materials, in op-eds, in angry captions, in thoughtful ones, in criticism, in hope. Amara saw it on a poster in Lumina Grid's Lagos office months later, handwritten by an employee and taped near a shared kitchen. She stood looking at it longer than she meant to. David found her there. "Good line," he said. She nodded. "Yes." He studied her for a moment. "You know what people still don't understand?" "What?" "This company isn't healthier because one investor saved it. It's healthier because power was finally interrupted." Amara let that settle. Then she said, "I used to think interruption was the enemy." David gave a tired half-smile. "Only when you're benefiting from the rhythm." He walked on. She stayed by the poster a little longer. A year after the hotel incident, Lumina Grid held its annual summit in Nairobi. Not in Atlanta, not in New York. Nairobi. The company wanted the location to reflect where much of its present and future work was rooted. Investors, operators, development partners, engineers, and community leaders gathered in a convention center washed with morning sun and framed by jacaranda trees. The event felt different from the old Lumina Grid gatherings. Less choreography, more substance. The attendee badges showed names in equal font, no giant hierarchy markers. Panels included operators alongside executives. Regional managers spoke without waiting for permission from headquarters personalities. Young engineers from the new fellowship program moved through the halls with the nervous excitement of people seeing new doors open in real time. David Okoye, now formally CEO, stood backstage reviewing notes. Amara was there too, not as keynote star, not as center of gravity, but as non-executive board chair with one moderated conversation later in the day. Her suit was simpler now, her posture less weaponized, her voice, when she used it, quieter and more deliberate. At 8:57 a.m., she moved toward the main entrance for one reason only. Jabari Ndlovu had arrived. He stepped from the car wearing a charcoal shirt, dark trousers, and the same kind of unadorned confidence he had always carried. Beside him, the morning pressed warm and bright against the glass. Amara walked forward. For a brief second, memory split the present open. The hotel, the hand, the refusal, the person she had been in that moment. Then she extended her own hand. "Good morning, Jabari," she said. He looked at her hand, then at her face. Then he took it. "Good morning, Amara." The handshake was simple. No audience applause, no swelling music, no miracle. Just a basic human act done correctly this time. And because of what it once had not been, it meant everything. Inside the summit hall, the first session began with data. Revenue stabilization, project expansion, improved retention, leadership diversification, reduced promotion disparities, expanded access in rural clinics and agricultural hubs. But David did not linger on numbers alone. He called forward 3 fellowship recipients, Acheng from Kisumu, Mariam from Tamale, and Sizwe from Pietermaritzburg. Young engineers whose careers had accelerated because someone had finally funded talent instead of proximity to prestige. The applause they received felt honest in a way corporate applause rarely does. Later, in a moderated conversation titled Power, Dignity, and Repair, Amara and Jabari shared a stage. Not as friends, not as a neat moral ending, as participants in a difficult truth that continued to unfold. The moderator asked Jabari, "Do you trust her now?" He smiled faintly. I trust what has been built more than I trust declarations. The audience murmured. He continued. Trust does not return because someone feels sorry. It returns slowly, if at all, when accountability becomes visible in structure, incentives, leadership choices, and daily behavior. Then the moderator turned to Amara. What would you say to the version of yourself from 1 year ago? Amara did not answer quickly. When she did, her voice was steady. I would say that polish is not character. I would say that excellence without humility becomes cruelty faster than ambitious people realize. I would say that if your idea of professionalism requires some people to prove their humanity before their competence, then your professionalism is broken. No one clapped immediately. And that was right. Some truths should breathe before they are applauded. Finally, a young woman from the audience stood to ask a question. She wore a fellowship badge and held the mic with both hands. My name is Miriam, she said. I'm one of the engineers who joined through the new program. My question is for both of you. What does justice look like when harm can't be undone? Jabari leaned forward first. Justice, he said, looks like refusing to pretend an apology finishes the work. Then Amara answered. And it looks like accepting that the person you become after accountability may not be admired, may not be restored, may not be celebrated, and doing the work anyway. This time, the silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Full of recognition. Full of discomfort. Full of thought. That evening, after the final panel, the summit guests drifted toward dinner under strings of warm lights hung in the courtyard. Laughter rose from clustered tables. Glasses touched. Languages overlapped. Music moved softly in the background. Amara stepped away from the crowd for a moment and stood beneath a jacaranda tree where purple blossoms had fallen across the stone like scattered silk. Jabari joined her a minute later, carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. He handed her one. Thank you, she said. He nodded. For a while they simply stood there. Then Amara asked, Do you ever get tired of being asked to turn harm into wisdom for other people? Jabari laughed quietly. All the time. She smiled, a small, tired smile of her own. I think I finally understand something. What's that? That the most dangerous version of bias isn't always hatred. Sometimes it's unexamined hierarchy wrapped in competence. He looked at her, considering. That's closer to the truth than many people ever get. She turned the glass in her hand. I used to think accountability would feel like being destroyed. And? It felt more like being stripped of whatever let me remain false. Jabari looked back toward the lights, where David was speaking with field managers and fellows in a loose circle. Good, he said. False things should feel expensive. They stood in companionable quiet after that. Not close, not healed in any simplistic sense, but honest. And sometimes honesty is the nearest form of peace available. Months later, the Fellowship Fund reached its second cohort. Regional grievance systems became a case study in operational accountability. Other firms copied Lumina Grid's governance reforms, sometimes sincerely, sometimes performatively. David kept pushing substance over symbolism. Jabari kept funding institutions that aligned values with structure. Amara taught one leadership seminar each quarter, not on visionary growth, not on fundraising mastery, but on the cost of unchecked assumptions in high-power environments. Students expected a clean redemption arc. She disappointed them. There is no transformation worth trusting, she told them once, that does not remain uncomfortable. And maybe that was the truest ending this story could offer. Not that one woman became a saint, not that one investor became a savior, not that a company was rescued and everyone lived happily inside corrected systems forever, but that a moment of humiliation was forced into visibility, that consequence reached power, that structure changed where sorrow once would have ended as speech, that one hand refused in public became, over time, a question larger than either person involved. Who do we decide matters before they speak? And what does that decision cost everyone? In the final interview recorded for the documentary's follow-up short, Jabari looked directly into the camera and said, "People always ask whether change is possible. It is. But change that costs nothing is usually branding. Real change rearranges comfort. It alters power. It forces memory to stay in the room long after the headlines leave." Then the clip cut to an image from the Nairobi summit. No shouting, no spectacle. Just a wide frame of a company hall filled with people of different shades, nations, classes, abilities, and backgrounds, speaking into the same future with fewer illusions than before. Not perfect, just more honest. And sometimes, in a world built on performance, honesty is the most radical light of all. If you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories.